When people talk about the horrors of combat in World War II, their minds often go to events such as the Blitz, the Pacific Theater, and other brutal land campaigns. What's often overlooked, though, are the conditions bomber crews faced. By some estimates, only 25% of men completed their tour of duty, about 25 missions, without getting killed, captured, or seriously wounded. But to understand why this was the case, we'll first need to understand what they were flying. Throughout the majority of the war, American forces mainly used the B-17 Flying Fortress, as well as its less beloved counterpart, the B-24 Liberator. While they varied in speed and maneuverability, they shared a similar crew layout with a pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, and several gunners, some of whom had additional roles in the plane, such as engineers and radio operators. This meant bombers usually flew with a crew of about 10. This crew, though, did not work in a comfortable environment. What immediately stands out about the interior of these planes is the size. Crew members barely had enough space to stand up. Once in the air, however, this became the least of their concerns.
Due to the necessity of open gun turrets, the cabin was unable to be pressurized or heated. Crew members tried to mitigate this with oxygen masks and electrically heated suits. However, these were by no means reliable, with electrical failures in suits and blockages in masks being common. This sadly meant that crew could quietly slip out of consciousness and die at their posts if a failure went unnoticed. Even if spotted, a brief malfunction with electrical heating under the temperatures of -40 to -70 Fahrenheit crews fought in could induce serious frostbite, if not a burn as well. The combination of burns on numb skin meant a crewman's flesh could silently cook away without him even noticing.
Extremities and oxygen masks weren't the only things damaged in sub-zero temperatures. Under these extreme conditions, glass surfaces such as the nose area, cockpit windows, and turrets would freeze over, leaving the crew blind to attacks. This got so bad that crews would cut sections of the plexiglass away, suffering even harsher temperatures just to see better. To make things even worse, the cold would disable guns, meaning that even with good visibility, crews were still extremely vulnerable to attacks by German fighters. These German planes awaiting crews in Axis airspace were arguably worse than the cold. Not only were the German guns kept closer to warm engines, and therefore less prone to malfunctions, but they were capable of inflicting massive damage onto bombers. While B-17s were famous for surviving tremendous beatings, sometimes returning on a single engine, the crews were nowhere near safe. While the bombers might look strong from the outside, in reality, the lightweight aluminum covering most of the plane was so weak a person could punch through it with a screwdriver. The only armored areas were placed around the pilots' heads and seat backs, measuring around 9 and 4 millimeters respectively. For reference, modern iPhones are just under this thickness. As you might expect, this meant flak would tear right through the plane, killing or severely injuring crew members. To minimize this, the planes were equipped with around 10 machine guns, depending on the variant, and flew in tight formations. While facing several hundred guns could make a German pilot think twice about attacking, at the end of the day, it was only a deterrent, so they could and would exploit any weakness they found. This included going after damaged planes and attacking head-on before the addition of chin turrets. When outside the range of Allied escort fighters, a roving group of German planes could easily fragment a bomber formation. While bombers could at least see and try to take out German fighters, they didn't have this luxury for every enemy they faced. When they reached their targets, another defense became a hazard. German cities and industrial centers bristled with clustered batteries of 4 88mm anti-aircraft guns. In these emplacements, each gun hurled 17-pound shells into the air at 15 to 25 rounds per minute, each one bursting into over 1,500 metal scraps. This shrapnel tore through bombers and created the distinctive black clouds visible in virtually every piece of bomber footage from the war. For the bombardier's bomb sight to function properly, the plane needed to be kept flying straight, killing the possibility of any evasive action. As one crew member put it, it wasn't a matter of if you would take flak, it was just a matter of where it would hit you and when. Just picture yourself flying into barrages of fire you knew could tear you to pieces, with no chance of fighting or backing out. Just the hope that you were lucky and weren't targeted. Experiencing this daily, thousands of surviving crew members were scarred, mentally as well as physically, for the rest of their lives. Zooming out from this, we have to remember that the tens of thousands of crew for whom this was a reality weren't the battle-hardened warriors you'd see in war movies, but just young boys, many of whom had barely finished high school. In a 1944 speech by J. Marvin Turner, he explains that the figure 20, referring to the planes lost in a mission, doesn't sound like much. But you have to stop and remember that there are 10 men on each plane. That means 200 men went down. Losses like this weren't rare occurrences, they happened continuously for years. And, after all this loss, the men didn't have too much time to psychologically recover. They simply woke up the next morning and continued to fly, mission after mission, knowing the odds of death, all in order to keep the Allied cause alive.